What's up, guys? Welcome or welcome back. I did a video a couple days ago about this derpy looking ass TikToker who was going out of her way to mind Simone Biles' business. I mentioned how Simone Biles clapped back at her and put her right in her place, and how right she was to do so. During that video, I got a comment from a lady named Angela. She had this to say: "I'm sorry I don't usually do this. I'm new to social media. You need to read some books. You sound like you think this just started. Learn the history of the patriarchy. Both sides are a little bit confused, women and men. Yes, women are offended sometimes because until recently, we were just property, like a house or a car, and men had all the money, all the power, all the votes, etc. Now, there are a lot of fundamental flaws in your reasoning here. But before I get to that, I need to go back to the reason for the first video in the first place. This TikToker, this woman, I believe her name's Kiera, has a long history of putting out some of the most toxic, destructive, and misandrist ideas on her TikTok page. She's a known man-hater. I don't know her history. I don't know her family history, her relationship. I don't know any of that, and I do not care. The body of her work is entirely one-sided. There is no nuance. There is no allowance for the fact that good men exist. She wholeheartedly disagrees with this notion, with this provable fact, and she has content related that shows this. Now, she took it upon herself again to stick her nose in Simone Biles' business and her family's. Simone Biles, to her credit, smacked her down to size and put her back in her place. Where does this, in her mind, necessity to mind someone else's business come from? Well, it stems from the easiest and most destructive of all human failings: jealousy. But even worse than jealousy, a breach of the 10th commandment: covetousness. Covetousness is the 10th commandment that we're commanded not to break. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbors, and God rattled off a list of different things that belong to your neighbor to Moses on Mount Sinai. See, the thing about jealousy is there's levels to it, there's a range to it. Jealousy could sound like, man, Jimmy has a great house. What a nice car he's got. What a great job he's got. What a pretty girlfriend he's got. I wish I had stuff like Jimmy. Okay. You can work through that positively by working hard and working on yourself as a guy, and you can get there if you work hard enough, just like he had to. Covetousness is jealousy on steroids, sniffing methamphetamine. Because covetousness says, I wish I had all those things, and I wish I had it because Jimmy doesn't deserve to have it. How dare he have it and not me? That's where things get scary. That's where people lose their lives and get their stuff stolen. Simone Biles is everything this chick is not. She's fit. Look at that gut she's got. She's actually attractive. This chick is barely passable without a ton of makeup on her face. She's friendly. She's engaging. She's fun to be around. She's successful. People know who she is because she's actually accomplished something that isn't very easy to do. Not to mention, she's been chosen. She's found a man of very high status, a handsome man who's very wealthy, who she respects and cares for, and is, by her own actions, has proven she's prepared to fight for against the unwarranted and unnecessary attacks on somebody who's never done anything with their lives, like this fatso who's barely passable. Now, that takes care of her. Let's get back to what you were saying. You were saying that I need to read more. Well, seeing as reading is one of my favorite pastimes, thank you for helping to reignite a lifelong passion. But what needs to be corrected is an understanding of how patriarchy works, okay? Outside of the 6-legged and 8-legged parts of the animal kingdom, matriarchy is an absolute failure. When it comes to the 6-legged and 8-legged parts of nature, those types of creatures, ants, bees, spiders, etc., are pheromone-based, meaning they take marching orders from the queen, and if the queen cannot give off her marching order through the use of pheromones, the entire colony falls apart and they all die. Humans are mammals. We work quite differently. Moreover, there are no matriarchies that can survive on their own because women lack the physical capacity for violence to protect themselves from an outside force. Only a patriarchy can do that. Patriarchy is not, I know you've been taught, because I don't know how old you are, I'm not asking. None of my business. But it seems to me that you've been taught that patriarchy is just the boogeyman hiding in the bushes outside your apartment. It's none of those things. It is benevolence made flesh. I'm not saying that some men throughout history haven't done bad things. But what we know about those bad men is that going back to time immemorial, there have been jails and prisons in the ancient world. They would call them dungeons for men like this, to lock them away from civilized people who were trying to live their lives and mind their business. Now, you mentioned in your, let me see if I remember this correct. I don't want to misquote you. You said that women were offended by her giving her husband and family members an opportunity to share her shine because women were treated as property, like a house or a car. Let's get something straight. The 13th Amendment, which prohibited slavery, has been the federal law of the land since December of 1865. We're talking about over 160 years ago. No one has been allowed to own anyone. So let's get that off the table, okay? Women were not the property of their husbands. They were under the legal authority of their husbands. You know, when it came to treating women equally, as far back as 1963, John Kennedy, may he rest in peace, signed into law the Equal Pay Act. That meant it was a federal law you were breaking if you took a woman who got hired the same day as a man, had the same educational pedigree as a man, had the same seniority on the job as a man, had the exact same experience as a man, and paid them differently for the exact same job. Any woman who thinks that's been done to her has the easiest case to win. She'll be a millionaire overnight. Funny how no one's ever brought that case to court, because they know they'd be laughed out of that courtroom if they tried. Beyond that, though, the Equal Employment Opportunity Act was signed into law by President Nixon back in '72. What that did was, it meant that, okay, if a woman wants a job and she's qualified for the job, no one's able to discriminate against her because of her sex or race or nationality or her religion, or if she were an immigrant legally immigrated to the United States and sworn in as a citizen. If she qualified for the job and could do the job, it made sense for the company to hire her for the job. Otherwise, they would face all kinds of fines and quite possibly being shut down. So there's no pay gap either. That's bullshit. Beyond that, you mentioned that men... If I sound frustrated with your comment, it's because I am. But I promise to be respectful, so I'm going to dial it back a bit. We've had etched in stone into law since 1974, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. When they signed this into federal law, that meant that from that day forward and every day since, that women could apply for things like credit cards, mortgages. They could purchase a car through financing at an auto dealership. They could purchase or they could sign their name to student loans, all in their own name. Before that, they couldn't. By the way, women got the right to vote under the 19th Amendment being ratified back in August of 1920. Before that, they didn't vote. And you know what's funny? Women did not want to vote outside the very loud, almost terroristic suffragettes. A very small minority of women, because women understood what the men of their lives at that time understood. Bear in mind, 1920, we're talking World War I era, okay? The women of that time knew what their husbands, adult sons, brothers, uncles, and grandfathers all knew. Voting came with a prerequisite responsibility. Sir, if you're going to vote, you are putting into office someone who could, with a stroke of a pen, send you and your brethren off to war, to fight and die in the trenches of France, on the Western Front in Germany, and where else in Europe that hellhole was making it happen, okay? The men knew this, so the men had to take voting very seriously. When women got the right to vote, they didn't have to, because they had no skin in the game. I don't know how old you are, but it stands to reason that you're a lot younger than someone born in 1974, 1965, 1920, certainly someone younger than someone born in 1865. So, all these so-called atrocities, which are grossly overestimated by the modern feminists, aren't atrocities at all. What they really were safeguards. Because once women got the right to vote, What do they vote for? Programs that put other people's money in their pockets. Once women got the right to sign their name on their own credit cards, their own mortgages, their own car loans, their own student loans, what has happened? The personal debt and student loan debt of women has absolutely skyrocketed. The patriarchy wasn't there to suppress women. It was there to protect them from themselves. Children too, and to a great degree animals, because, conservation is a big thing now. But okay, maybe you don't want to believe that. Maybe you want to believe that the patriarchy is just this evil force waiting outside the bushes to jump on you and just take things away from you. Well, okay. If you're going to believe that, you're going to have to also believe that the patriarchy isn't fire and rescue, that it isn't law enforcement, that it isn't the men who go out, like myself as a veteran, into the military to protect American interests from hostiles overseas. Listen, thank you for writing in. Thank you for leaving your comment. But before I leave, let me say this to you. I don't think you're a bad person, but I think you've been given bad information that's led you to a lifetime of false narratives that are very easily disproven. Women are, and have been for a long time, able to do all manner of things, whether they should have or not. It's a separate matter and a separate discussion for a different time. But for right now, understand that there is no reason for any modern woman to be up her own ass or have a chip on her shoulder about atrocities that were written out of law long before she ever took her first breath, decades before in some cases. Most women alive today have never lived during a time where they couldn't get their own credit card. They couldn't sign for their own car loan. They couldn't go to college if they wanted to. Most women breathing air today, and possibly you are one of these women, have never known what it's like to have a man co-sign for your debts because you weren't legally allowed to have them in your own name, or being told that she was legally prohibited from casting a ballot. So, let it go. Every modern convenience you've ever enjoyed is either a discovery of or an invention of a man looking to make the lives of women and children easier, better, and with the advent of 21st century and 20th century pharmaceutical science, a longer lifespan as well. Thank you, Angela, for writing in. I hope all is well with you. But that's my time. Like the video, comment down below. Share with your friends and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Never let your brother suffer in silence when the truth can set him free. Networkers, we working. Until next time.